Billionaire asked his daughter to choose a mother among the models, but she chose a black maid. Hello, my wonderful family, and welcome back to our channel. I am so grateful to have you here with me today. We're about to dive into a story that asks a profound question. Can the purest love be found where we least expect it? It explores the idea that a child's heart often sees a truth that adult eyes, clouded by status and expectation, completely miss. As we begin, I want you to think about something. Have you ever completely misjudged someone based on their job or appearance, only to discover the beautiful soul underneath? Let me know your story in the comments below. I'd love to read your experiences. Now, let's begin. Julian Vance believed he could acquire anything: companies, islands, even a perfect life. He lined them up like priceless statues, a dozen polished models in a room of glass and steel. But when his 7-year-old daughter finally pointed, her small voice echoing in the vast, silent penthouse, she didn't choose a cover girl. She chose the woman holding the dust rag. The silence in Julian Vance's penthouse was a commodity he'd paid millions for. It was a thick, heavy silence, broken only by the whisper-quiet hum of the climate control system and the distant, muted heartbeat of the city 50 floors below. His home was a monument to minimalism and control: gleaming chrome, stark white walls, and furniture so artfully arranged it looked like no human had ever dared to sit on it. It was less a home and more a gallery, and Julian was its lonely, permanent exhibit. He stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, not looking at the sprawling metropolis, but at the reflection of the man staring back. Sharp suit, perfect hair, a jawline that could cut glass. He was the image of success, the very icon of power he'd spent his life becoming. But the eyes were hollow, a reflection of the cavernous space he called a living room. For 3 years, since his wife Amelia had passed, this hollow ache had been his only constant companion. He'd tried to fill it with work, with acquisitions, with the relentless pursuit of more. But the silence always won. His solution, like all his solutions, was pragmatic. His daughter, Lily, needed a mother, a maternal figure. And he needed a partner, a hostess, someone to complete the picture of the perfect life. So he'd approached it like a corporate merger. His assistant, a woman as efficient and colorless as the office she inhabited, had curated a list. Models, heiresses, philanthropists, all beautiful, all from the right pedigree, all pre-vetted. Today was the final stage of the interview process. A casual, elegant brunch where Lily would meet the top 12 candidates. He called it Lily's Choice, a clever, heartwarming spin for a process that felt as sterile as a lab experiment. He glanced at a silver-framed photo on his desk. Amelia smiled back, her eyes full of a light he hadn't seen in this house since she'd left it. He straightened his tie, the gesture sharp and final. It was time. Meanwhile, on the other side of the penthouse, in a world away from the chrome and glass, Lena was on her hands and knees. She wasn't praying. She was performing surgery. With a needle and thread she kept in her apron for just such emergencies, she was carefully stitching the felt ear back onto a well-loved one-eyed bunny named Barnaby. Lily's room was the only place in the entire penthouse that felt alive. It was a whirlwind of soft pinks and purples, with crayon drawings taped to the walls and a galaxy of glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. "Is he going to be okay, Lena?" a small voice asked, laced with worry. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, her chin resting on her palms, watching Lena's dark, nimble fingers work their magic. Lena didn't look up, her focus intense. "He's going to be just fine, sweet pea," she murmured, her voice a low, soothing melody that always managed to calm Lily's anxieties. Barnaby is very brave. Just a little battle scar to show all his friends. She tied a neat little knot and snipped the thread with her teeth. There, good as new. She handed the bunny back to Lily, whose face broke into a radiant smile. The child hugged the toy tightly before launching herself forward and wrapping her arms around Lena's neck. The hug was pure and unconditional, smelling of lavender soap and the faint, sweet scent of a child's love. For a moment, Lena closed her eyes, soaking it in. These moments were the reason she endured the coldness of the rest of the house, the master's clipped, impersonal orders. This small, warm circle of affection was her real paycheck. Just then, the door slid open with a soft electronic whoosh. Julian stood in the doorway, a figure from another world. He didn't seem to notice the tender scene on the floor. His eyes were fixed on his daughter. "Lily," he said, his voice polite but devoid of warmth. "Come with me. It's time to choose." The grand living room, usually a sterile echo chamber, was now filled with the low hum of polite conversation and the delicate scent of expensive perfume. 12 women, each one a masterpiece of genetics and grooming, were scattered artfully around the space. They were a living catalogue of modern beauty, the sharp-edged fashion model, the sun-kissed heiress, the sophisticated art dealer. They laughed at Julian's scripted pleasantries, their smiles perfectly calibrated, their eyes flickering with a competitive gleam that was just as sharp as his own. They sipped champagne and nibbled on canapés, all while subtly appraising each other, the penthouse, and the small child who held all the power. Lily stood beside her father, her small hand swallowed in his. She was a miniature curiosity in a pale yellow dress, her eyes wide as she took in the spectacle. To her, they looked like the dolls her father sometimes bought her, beautiful, breakable, and with blank, unblinking eyes. Julian cleared his throat, and a practiced silence fell over the room. "Ladies," he began, his voice smooth and commanding, "thank you all for coming. As you know, this is an unconventional process, but nothing is more important to me than my daughter's happiness." He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look loving, but felt more like he was steadying a valuable asset. "Lily has had the chance to meet all of you. Now, I'm going to ask her a very important question." He knelt, bringing himself down to her level, though the emotional distance between them remained a chasm. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice softer now, a performance for the audience. "All of these lovely ladies are here today because they would be very happy to be a part of our family, to be a new mother for you. Is there anyone here that you would choose?" 12 pairs of eyes locked onto the small girl. 12 perfect smiles were aimed at her like weapons. The air was thick with expectation. Lily's gaze swept across the room, past the shimmering dresses and dazzling jewelry. She saw them, but she didn't see them. Her eyes kept searching, looking for something familiar, something real. And then she found it. In the background, by the marble countertop that served as a bar, Lena was quietly clearing away used glasses and discarded napkins. She moved with a practiced invisibility, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the couture in the room. She was focused on her work, trying to be a ghost, unaware that she was the center of anyone's universe. Lily's small arm lifted, her finger pointing not at the glittering lineup, but past them, toward the woman who wasn't part of the show at all. Her voice, though soft, sliced through the penthouse's curated silence with devastating clarity. "Her," Lily said. "I choose Lena." For a beat, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The clinking of glasses stopped. The polite chatter died. Julian froze, The charming paternal smile still plastered on his face, but his eyes were a vortex of confusion and disbelief. The models exchanged baffled, condescending glances. Some let out a barely audible scoff. Lena, who had just picked up a delicate champagne flute, froze mid-motion. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it felt like a physical blow. Every head in the room swiveled to stare at her. The spotlight she had spent her life avoiding was now blindingly, excruciatingly fixed on her. She felt her cheeks burn with a humiliating fire, and she wished for nothing more than for the polished marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. Julian was the first to recover. He let out a short, forced laugh, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, Lily," he said, patting her head. "You're being silly. Lena works for us. She helps us." He tried to gently turn her head back toward the models. "Look at these beautiful ladies. How about Victoria? You liked her story about her pony, remember? But Lily's feet were planted." She shook her head, her little brow furrowed with a stubbornness Julian knew all too well. "No, Daddy. I don't want Victoria. I want Lena. She fixed Barnaby. She sings the sleepy song. She knows." "Knows what, darling?" Julian asked through gritted teeth, his patience fraying, his public facade cracking. The embarrassment was a physical sensation, crawling up his neck like a rash. "She knows me," Lily whispered, and the simple truth of it silenced him. Lena, mortified, took a step back, her hands held up as if to ward off the attention. "Mr. Vance, sir, she's just a child." "She doesn't mean it," she stammered, her voice trembling. I was just clearing the glasses. Please, I'm so sorry." She looked at the floor, at the wall, anywhere but at the sea of judging eyes. She was a maid. This was a catastrophic mistake, a line crossed so completely that she was sure she'd be fired on the spot. Her only thought was to undo it, to erase herself from the equation. "Of course," Julian said, his voice clipped and sharp, directed at Lena, but meant for the room. "It's a misunderstanding." He stood up, turning to his guests with a strained smile. "Children, you know how they are. It seems we need a little break." Julian's attempt to dismiss the moment was a spectacular failure. Seeing her father disregard her choice and seeing the terror in Lena's eyes, something inside Lily snapped. Quiet, observant child was replaced by a storm of pure 7-year-old grief. Her face crumpled and a heartbreaking sob tore from her chest. "No, I want Lena," she wailed, her little body shaking. She launched herself away from her father and ran, not to one of the models, but straight to Lena, wrapping her arms around her legs and clinging to her like a life raft. "Don't go. Don't let him send you away." The scene had now devolved from awkward to unbearable. The models stood frozen, unsure of the protocol for a billionaire's daughter, having a complete meltdown while clinging to the help. Julian's face was a mask of cold fury and utter helplessness. He could command boardrooms and bend markets to his will, but he had no idea how to handle the raw, unfiltered anguish of his own child. "That's enough," he finally snapped, his voice dangerously low. He gestured dismissively to the models. "Thank you for your time. My assistant will be in touch." It was a brutal, unceremonious end, and the women, their perfect smiles finally gone, collected their things and fled the penthouse, leaving a trail of whispers in their wake. The door slid shut, plunging the room back into its familiar, heavy silence, now punctuated by Lily's ragged sobs. Julian stood alone with his crying daughter and the woman she had chosen. The chasm between employer and employee had evaporated, replaced by a tense, shared crisis. He looked at Lena, who was awkwardly patting Lily's back, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears of confusion and fear. For the first time, Julian was completely out of his depth. His usual tools, money, power, authority, were useless. He took a deep, steadying breath, his pride warring with a desperate need to make the crying stop. He walked over, his expensive shoes silent on the marble. He didn't look at Lena, but at the top of his daughter's head, buried in Lena's uniform. "Can you?" he started, the words catching in his throat. He hated asking for help. "Can you calm her down?" It was not a command, but a plea. Lena looked up at him, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of protective instinct for the child in her arms. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She knelt, gathering the sobbing little girl properly into her arms. "Shh, sweet pea," she murmured, her voice the familiar, soothing melody. "It's okay. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Let's go to your room, okay? We'll read Barnaby a story." As Lena carried Lily out of the room, Julian watched them go. He was left alone in the wreckage of his perfectly planned life, the ghost of a dozen perfumes mingling with the undeniable scent of failure. For now, he was trapped. He couldn't fire Lena, not while his daughter was clinging to her. He was forced into a fragile, unwilling truce, bound to this woman by the one thing he couldn't control, his daughter's heart. We just witnessed a child's heart make a choice that defied all logic and social status. It makes you wonder, what are the things we lose sight of as adults? If you had to describe what truly makes a person rich in one word, what would it be? Share your word in the comments. I think my word would be connection. The days that followed were a landscape of unspoken tension. Julian retreated into his work, his interactions with Lena reduced to clipped, necessary exchanges. He avoided Lily's room, a place he now associated with his own inadequacy. Yet, he couldn't ignore the change in the penthouse's atmosphere. For the first time, he heard genuine laughter echoing from his daughter's room, not the polite, stilted kind he coaxed out of her, but deep, joyful giggles. He would walk past her doorway and hear Lena's voice, not just singing the sleepy song, but telling elaborate stories, making animal noises, and engaging in the kind of playful nonsense he'd forgotten existed. One evening, driven by a strange mix of resentment and curiosity, he found himself standing outside Lily's closed door. He was about to knock when he heard Lena's voice, soft and wistful. "And my mama always said that kindness was like a garden," Lena was saying. "You have to tend to it every day, pull out the weeds of meanness, and water it with good words. And if you do, it will grow things so beautiful you can't even imagine." "Did your mama have a garden?" Lily asked. "Oh yes, sweet pea. A tiny little patch behind our house, but it was magnificent. She could grow anything. Sunflowers so tall they looked like they were trying to kiss the sky. And she grew tomatoes so red and sweet they tasted like candy." A painful memory lanced through Julian. Amelia had loved her garden. She'd had a rooftop oasis built, a riot of color and life amidst the concrete jungle. After she was gone, he'd had it all torn out, paved over. The sight of it was too much to bear. He pushed the thought away, focusing again on the voices inside. Later that night, unable to sleep, he found himself in his home office, aimlessly searching for a document. He opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years, and his fingers brushed against a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver locket, a gift he'd given Amelia on their first anniversary. He opened it. On one side was a picture of him and Amelia, young and impossibly happy. On the other, a tiny, intricately folded piece of paper. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. It was a note from her, written in her elegant, looping script. "My dearest Julian," it read, "you build empires of glass and steel, but please don't forget to build a home of laughter and warmth. A real home isn't about perfection. It's about the beautiful, messy, wonderful chaos of love. It's about singing off key and fixing broken toys. Please, my love, don't let our daughter grow up in a gallery. Let her grow up in a garden." The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He sank into his chair, the note shaking in his hand. He had failed her. He had torn out her garden and turned their home into the very gallery she had feared. He looked at the closed-circuit monitor on his desk, flicking to the camera feed for Lily's room. She was asleep, her face peaceful. Curled in a chair beside the bed, a book fallen into her lap, was Lena. She had stayed until Lily was dreaming, a silent, steadfast guardian. The mystery wasn't why Lily had chosen Lena. The mystery was how he had been so blind for so long. The locket felt heavy in Julian's pocket the next day. He found Lena in the kitchen, carefully cutting the crusts off a sandwich for Lily's lunch. The air between them was, as usual, thick with silence. He cleared his throat. "Lena," he said. Her name felt foreign on his tongue. He'd only ever called her Lena in his head, aloud. It was always a formal, detached command. She turned, her expression guarded, expecting another clipped order. "Yes, Mr. Vance." He pulled the locket from his pocket and placed it on the counter between them. He didn't say anything, just pushed it gently toward her. Lena looked from his face to the silver object, her brow furrowed in confusion. "My late wife, Amelia," he began, the name a painful pebble in his mouth. "She wrote about gardens and broken toys." He met her eyes, and for the first time, he let her see not the billionaire, but the grieving, lost man beneath. "You've been tending to a garden I let die." Lena's guarded expression softened. She saw the raw pain in his eyes, the profound grief he had kept locked away behind a fortress of wealth. She looked at the locket, then back at him. "She must have been a wonderful woman," Lena said softly, her voice filled with a sincere empathy that disarmed him completely. "She was," he admitted, the words barely a whisper. "And I haven't been the father she would have wanted me to be." It was a confession, a crack in the armor, and into that crack, a fragile light began to shine. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic in the penthouse shifted. The silence began to fill with new sounds. Julian started coming home earlier. He would find Lena and Lily on the floor, building elaborate pillow forts, and instead of walking past, he would linger in the doorway. One afternoon, Lily grabbed his hand and pulled him down with them, insisting he be the king of the castle. To his own surprise, he sat, his tailored suit creasing, a pillow crown placed crookedly on his head. He watched Lena interact with Lily, saw the easy affection, the patient love, and felt a warmth spread through his chest that no business deal had ever given him. He started talking to Lena, not as an employer, but as a person. He learned about her mother's garden, about her dream of one day opening a small community library for children. She learned about his love for architecture, not as an investment, but as an art form. They discovered a shared, dry sense of humor. They would share quiet smiles over Lily's comical pronouncements. A real, tentative bond began to form, woven from shared moments of vulnerability and the mutual love they had for the little girl who had brought them together. It felt like healing. It felt like home. The fragile peace was shattered by the arrival of a letter. It was from the board of the prestigious private school Lily was set to attend, the same one Julian had attended. It was a formal invitation to the annual Parent-Guardian Gala, a key event for networking and securing a child's social standing before the school year even began. The letter stated clearly, "We look forward to welcoming Mr. Julian Vance and his partner." Julian stared at the embossed stationery, and the old world, his world, came rushing back in. The world of appearances, of judgment, of pedigree. He thought of the other parents, the CEOs, the old money dynasties, the political figures. What would they think if he arrived with Lena? The whispers, the condescending smiles, the pitying looks. They wouldn't see the woman who had brought laughter back into his home. They would see a black maid on the arm of a billionaire. A scandal. A joke. His insecurity, the same deep-seated fear of being judged that had driven him to amass his fortune, flared with a vengeance. The warmth of the past few weeks felt like a foolish, dangerous indulgence. He found Lena in the living room, reading a story to Lily. He waited until Lily had scampered off to find a toy before he spoke. "Lena, we need to talk," he said, his voice stripped of the warmth it had recently found. It was the voice of Mr. Vance again. She looked up, instantly sensing the shift. "Is everything all right?" "I received an invitation for Lily's school," he said, holding up the letter like an indictment. "It's a gala for parents." He didn't need to say the next part, but he did anyway, the words cold and clinical. "Obviously, you can't come with me." The words landed like a slap. Lena recoiled, her face paling. It wasn't just the rejection, but the way he said it. Obviously. As if their connection, the shared laughter, the quiet confessions, were a ridiculous fantasy that a single piece of paper could erase. As if she were, and always would be, just the help. I never assumed I would," she stammered, her pride wounded, her heart sinking. "Good," he said, relieved, completely misreading her pain as agreement. "But there's another problem, Lily. She's going to want you to come. She's going to make a scene." He started pacing, the familiar motion of a man solving a business problem. "I've been thinking, maybe it's best if you take some time off. A paid vacation. Starting now. I'll tell Lily you had a family emergency. By the time you get back, the gala will be over and things can go back to normal." "Back to normal?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling with a hurt so deep it felt like a betrayal. "You mean back to me being invisible? Back to when I was just the woman who dusted your furniture?" "This isn't personal," Julian said defensively, annoyed that she was making it so. "This is about protecting my daughter's future. About perception. About my world. A world you are not a part of." Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the fragile bond they had built. Kindness, the shared smiles, the tentative hope, it all turned to dust. All her life, she had been told, in ways both subtle and overt, that she didn't belong. To hear it now, from him, after he had let her believe she did, was the cruelest cut of all. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She straightened her back, her dignity a shield against his cold pragmatism. "I see," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You're right, Mr. Vance. This isn't my world. And I was a fool to ever think it could be." Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Julian alone in the silent, cavernous room. He had made his choice. He had protected his image, his status, his world. But as he stood there, the silence that returned was colder and more absolute than ever before. He had just sent away the only person who had ever made his house feel like a home. The silence in the penthouse was no longer a luxury. It was a punishment. Lena was gone. Julian had executed his plan with cold efficiency. A generous check, a ticket to anywhere she wanted, and a carefully crafted lie for his daughter. Lena's mother is very sick, he told Lily, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. She had to go away for a while to take care of her. But he hadn't anticipated the fallout. Lily didn't just cry. A light inside her went out. The giggles were gone, replaced by a sullen, heartbreaking quiet. She wouldn't play with her toys, not even Barnaby. He misses Lena, too, she'd mumbled, pushing the one-eyed bunny away. She moved through the vast, sterile rooms, like a little ghost, a mirror of the man her father had become. Julian tried to fill the void. He bought her extravagant gifts, took her to amusement parks, offered her anything she wanted. But all she would say, her voice small and defeated, was, "I just want Lena." Julian was alone, truly alone, adrift in the wreckage of his own making. The gala was 2 days away. His suit was laid out, the ticket was on his desk, but the victory felt like a crushing defeat. The praise of strangers seemed pathetic compared to the loss of his daughter's joy and the echo of Lena's wounded voice. "I was a fool to ever think it could be." The words haunted him. He found himself in Lily's room that night, the space feeling empty and cold without its usual warmth. He saw the book Lena had been reading on the nightstand. He picked it up. It was a simple children's book about a lonely star who finds a friend in a little firefly. On the inside cover, in neat, careful print, was an inscription, "Property of the Lena May Community Library, future home of 1,000,000 stories." Her dream. A dream he had trampled on his way to a meaningless high society party. The weight of his choice finally crushed him. What was he protecting? A world of hollow smiles and transactional relationships? He looked at his sleeping daughter, at the faint tear tracks on her cheeks. He was sacrificing her happiness and his own for the approval of people he didn't even like. He had chosen the gallery over the garden. His phone was in his hand before he'd even consciously decided. He scrolled through his contacts, past the COs and lawyers, to the single entry under. His thumb hovered over the call button. His pride screamed at him not to. It was weak. It was an admission of failure. But then he looked at Amelia's picture on his nightstand, her smiling eyes seeming to ask the question, "What kind of home are you building, Julian?" He pressed the button. It rang once, twice. He was about to hang up, his courage failing, when she answered. "Hello." Lena's voice was quiet, tired. For a moment, he couldn't speak. "Lena," he finally managed, his own voice hoarse. I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake." Silence stretched between them. "My world. It isn't worth anything without you and Lily in it. I was the fool, Lena. Not you. I was a coward." The confession hung in the air, stripped of all pride. "I know I have no right to ask. But please, can you come home?" Lena stood on the porch of her mother's small, tidy house 200 miles away, the phone pressed to her ear. She had cried for 2 days straight for the betrayal, for Lily, and for the foolish hope she had allowed herself to feel. She had listened to Julian's words, her heart warring with itself. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to say no, to never again step foot in a world that could dismiss her so easily. But then she thought of Lily's face, of her fierce, loving hugs. She thought of Barnaby the bunny. She thought of the surprising, vulnerable moments with Julian, the man behind the billionaire mask. "Is Lily okay?" was the first thing she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "No," Julian answered honestly, the single word conveying everything. She's not. And neither am I. That was it. That was the truth she needed to hear. It wasn't an order or a negotiation. It was a plea from a broken family. I'll be on the first train in the morning, she said softly. The next evening, there was no gala for Julian Vance. Instead, he stood by the grand windows of his penthouse, watching the city lights blur to life. He wasn't looking at his reflection. He was watching the street below, waiting. When the elevator doors finally slid open, Lily, who had been sitting listlessly on the couch, shot to her feet. Lena. Lily launched herself across the room and into Lena's open arms. Lena fell to her knees, burying her face in Lily's hair, holding her as if she would never let go. The sound of Lily's happy, tearful sobs filled the silence, and it was the most beautiful sound Julian had ever heard. He stood back, giving them their moment. His heart ached with a mixture of shame and overwhelming gratitude. When Lena finally looked up, her eyes met his over Lily's head. He saw no anger in them, only a deep, knowing compassion. He walked over, his steps slow and deliberate. He knelt down beside them, joining their small circle on the floor. He didn't know what to say, how to apologize for the chasm he had created. So, he simply reached out and placed his hand over Lena's, where it rested on Lily's back. It was a silent promise. "Welcome home," he whispered. A few months later, the penthouse was unrecognizable. Pillows were permanently scattered on the floor. Brightly colored paintings, made by Lily and Lena, adorned the stark white walls. The air was filled with the smell of baking cookies and the sound of off-key singing. In the center of the living room, where a cold, modern sculpture used to stand, was a large, comfortable sofa, where the three of them often piled together to read stories. One afternoon, Julian presented Lena with a thick portfolio. Inside were the architectural blueprints and legal deeds for a charming old building downtown. The sign on the blueprint read, "The Lena Maid and Amelia Vance Community Library." Tears streamed down Lena's face as she looked at him, her eyes shining with disbelief and love. He had not only remembered her dream, he had intertwined it with the memory of his wife, bridging his past and his future. He took her hand. "A home isn't about perfection," he said, echoing the words from Amelia's locket. "It's about the beautiful, messy, wonderful chaos of love." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "And I choose this. I choose you." Just like his daughter had, months before, in a room full of polished statues, Julian Vance had finally made the right choice. He hadn't just found a mother for his daughter. He had found the missing piece of his own heart, a love that was unexpected, profound, and, at last, home. What a powerful journey of love, class, and the true meaning of family. It reminds us that the best things in life are never what we plan for. And now I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect on. What is one small act of kindness you can do today that might unknowingly change someone's entire world? Share your beautiful ideas in the comments. Thank you for being here with me, my amazing online family. I can't wait to see you in the next story.